Hello ladies and gents. In this video we're going to learn how to integrate a web API into a Thunkable app. You can see I've got a very basic app on the screen here. I have two buttons, a label and a blank image component. Now when I run this app in the web preview mode and I click on get fact, you can see that it displays a random fact about dogs. And if I click on get fact again, it changes the fact that's being displayed. If I click on get image, it should load in a random image of a dog. And if I click on the get image button again, it should display a different image. And these should change every single time I click the buttons. So how did I do this? Well, I did this by integrating a web API that returned the facts and the different images to my app. And to do this was very simple. If I just exit web preview and go to the blocks, you can see there isn't much code here. So in this video, we're going to learn how to set this up and how to use and integrate these web APIs that you can find online. In a lot of the YouTube videos that you'll watch that show you how to do this, they usually give you one API to use and you just add it to your app and it all works. But when you find APIs that you want to use online yourself, it's not quite as straightforward and you have to know where to get the correct URL to use in your app so that the API actually works. And that's something that a lot of the videos that you'll find on YouTube and in other places tend to gloss over. And when you try to do this for yourself, it can become a little bit confusing. So we're going to try and make this much easier today so that you can create these API-based apps yourself easily. So I'm going to start by going back to my project window, and I've created a copy of the app that we've just looked at. So if I open this copy, the app itself is exactly the same as before. The screen layout is exactly the same. You can see I've got two buttons, get fact, get image. We've got the label to display the fact and the blank image component with no image in it. Now if we go to the blocks, you'll see that there are no blocks because we're going to build this code together so you can understand how it all works and how to get the app up and running. So if you navigate to the GitHub website, you will see that there are lots of free APIs that you can use. And if you scroll through the category list, there's all kinds of different categories for APIs that you can use in your different apps. This isn't the only place to get free APIs. There are other APIs that you can access online if you do a quick Google search. But some you'll have to pay for to access. These are all free. I've not gone through each one. We're only going to use one or two today, but these should be free. Most of them are that I've used so far. So I'm going to go to the animals APIs, and the first one I'm going to go to is dog facts. So there are two here, random dog facts. Now if I click on the first one, it gives me some documentation that was put together by the creator of this API. And if I click on the back button and choose the next dog facts one in the list, this is a completely different website altogether. So APIs are made by different people and they don't always work in the same way. And some are very easy to use and others aren't quite as straightforward because it can be more difficult to find the little bits of information you need in order to get it working. Now this is where ChatGPT is going to make life really easy for us, and this is a great tool to use when you're unsure of how to do something. So when you open up one of these websites, one of these API websites, there'll be lots of different information and links, and it's not always clear how to use the information that's being given in your app. So here we've got this big subheading here. It says use it as an API. And it says here live endpoint. So that's clearly something important. And then path. And that's obviously something important as well, right? But what does this all mean? So when you're adding an API into your Thunkable project, you need a URL that you can add to the project to tell the app where to look for this data that the API is retrieving and bringing into your app. So there's two parts to the URL. There's this first part here called the endpoint. And that is think of it like a road into a town centre that you follow. And then to get to your final destination, you also need the path. So this is like another branching road off the main road that leads somewhere. So the endpoint is the path into the town centre, and the path is the last bit of road that leads to a shop, for example, like a bookstore. So we need these two things. We need the endpoint and the path, and we need to combine them together to create a full URL. But with this information here, how do I do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this information. So I'll just hit Command C there. Oh, I've copied too much. Just that bit, right? Don't need all the stuff above. Command C, and I'm going to go to ChatGPT. And I'll tell it, I am making a Thunkable app using APIs. What is the endpoint and path I need to use in my app? I have this information from an API website. So I'm just basically telling it what I've done and what I'm looking for, and I'm trying to minimize the spelling errors that I'm typing, but that's hard to do when I'm talking and thinking at the same time. I can't do many things all at once. I'm not that smart. So I'm just going to paste in that information, and then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to see what it says. Okay, so it's telling me that the live endpoint is this http dog-api kindduff.com, and the path is api.facts. So it says this is the path that I need. This is the full URL when I combine those two things, but it's also talking about parameters. So I'm just going to say no, I don't want the parameter, just the endpoint and path. I've got a spelling error here, but ChatGPT is smart enough to figure it out. So let's hit enter and see what comes up. Okay, so it's still giving me two things here. So I'm going to ask it one more time. Please give me the full URL with these two combined. There we go. Okay, so we got there in the end. So I needed to ask ChatGPT a few questions, but in the end, it gave me the full URL. Now, if you're really unsure about how to use these APIs and you're kind of swimming in information with all the documentation that the API creator's given you, ChatGPT is an excellent tool to get to this final point. So I'm just going to copy that code, that URL, and I'm going to go back to Thunkable. Now, I am going to make sure you're in the Blocks tab, and I'm going to scroll down to Advanced and click on that. And you'll see here, the first list in that Advanced option is Web APIs. And I'm going to click the plus icon. And here it says URL. So this is the URL that is going to lead to the API, right? So let's just hit Command V there to paste that in. And I'm just going to change the name here by clicking on that pencil, Web API 1, dog facts, because I'm going to have two different APIs in this app. So I need to make sure I name them appropriately. So Web API 1, dog facts, and this is the URL. All these query parameters, body and headers, I'm going to leave blank and just click submit, right? So that's the first API set up for use with my app. So now I'm going to go to blocks and then click on control. No, I'm not. I'm going to click on button 1. And if we remember, button 1 is the get fact button. So what would probably be a good idea here is if I name these buttons. So button 1, I'll just click here. I'll call that get fact. And button 2, I'll call this get image. So try to name your components appropriately. It makes things much easier later on. Right, so let's go back to blocks then. Now, click on button 1, get fact, and I'm going to drag in this block here. When button 1 is clicked, we're going to do something. So now I need to scroll down to my Web API 1 dog facts, and you'll see here we've got lots of different blocks. And I'm going to drag in call Web API 1 dog facts get. I'm going to drag that in there. And you'll see we've got outputs, response, status, and error. So now I am going to go back to control and I'm going to drag in an if, do, else block. And I'm going to duplicate the error block and say if there's some kind of error, I'm going to set label 1's text to and display the error. So now I need to click on label 1 and find set label 1's text to. Drag that into do. And again, duplicate error and drag that into place there. So what does this do so far? When button 1 get fact is clicked, call the dog facts API and get some data from it. So we've got this conditional statement here, the if, do, else block. If there's an error, set the text in label 1 to error, tell us there's an error. But if everything's fine, what we're going to do is duplicate this. So set label 1 text to, not error. So I'm going to move that out of the way and then just delete that block. And I'm going to say response. I want it to give us a response from the API. There we go. Right. So let's click on web preview and click get fact and see if it connects to our API. There we go. Right? It has connected. Now you can see it has some strange little tags in, fact and success true. So if I just come out of this for a moment, why is it doing that? So if I go to my dog facts and click on the little cog and just copy and paste. So let's just copy that web address and then close that down. And I'll open up a blank window and paste that in. So this is what the JSON file that the API is reading from looks like. And you can see that it's giving us all of the information in the JSON file, even the little data tag, so facts and success. And I don't want that. All I want is the actual fact itself. So let's go back to Thunkable and let's fix that. So I'm going to remove that response block for a moment. And what I'm going to do is go to the, back under core, go to the objects block. And we're going to choose this one, get property of object. So I'm going to drag this in and paste it there, connect it in there. So set label 1's text to get property. We're going to leave property name in there for a moment. And then of object, we need to go to objects again and say get object from JSON. Right. So what are the properties in that JSON file? So let's go back and have a look at it. You can see there facts is the data key, the thing that the API is looking for. And from that facts, it pulls that sentence, right? the little fact that it gives. So let's just copy the word facts and say property name. I'm going to delete that and put facts in there. And so get property facts of object from the JSON, and then put this response block back in so it pulls that response from the JSON file. So let's run this now and see if it works. Click on web preview, get fact. There we go. Chocolate is poisonous to dogs because it contains theobromine. I've got no idea what that is, but I suggest you never feed it to your dogs. And then I can exit out of that if I want, or just click get fact again. It changes again every time. So this is working. And if I go back to that JSON file, when I refresh the browser window, you can see that the fact changes because that's what the developer created the API to do, right? So that's working perfectly. That's great. So different JSON files will have different little data identifiers. And these are the things that you need to look for and use inside your Thunkable app. So let's go back to the app and let's just come out of the web preview mode and let's get the image part working. So I'm going to close down that JSON file window. We don't need that anymore. This is all working. So I'm going to click on the back button. I'm going to go back to my list of free animal related APIs. And if I just scroll down through the list, you can see here I've got one called Random Dog, and it says here random pictures of dogs. So that'll do. I want pictures of dogs, so I'm going to click on that one. But this time it's just given me a simple URL and a line from a JSON file. I don't know what to do with this. There's no documentation or anything. It's completely different from the data that we saw, the documentation that we saw before. So this is where I'm going to go back to ChatGPT and ask it for help. So I'm going to say Command C, I'm going to copy that web address and say, okay, because I like to talk to ChatGPT like it's a real person. Okay, I have a web address for an API, colon, I'm going to paste that in. I also have this information from the URL. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to copy this whole line and paste it into ChatGPT. What is the endpoint and path for this API? And let's see what it gives me. The provided URL, and then that's the URL I copied in. The endpoint is the entire URL, and the path is the part of the URL after the domain. In this case, the /woof.json. Right, so what that's telling me is the web address itself. So this whole web address, that is what I need in Thunkable. That's what it's telling me. So you can see https random.dog.woof.json. And if I go back to ChatGPT, that's exactly what it's telling me there. Great. So let's see if ChatGPT is correct. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my Thunkable app. And now I'm going to scroll back down to advanced, and under APIs, I'm going to click the plus button again. And now I'm going to call this API 1. No, I'm not. I'm going to change that because API 1 already exists. So API 2, dog, image. And under the URL, I'm going to paste in that URL that I took from the website and then click submit. So now I've got 2 APIs in my project. So let's get this image one working. Now, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate. So let me just zoom out of this a little bit. I'm going to duplicate all of this because the code's going to be almost identical. So right click on that, duplicate, and just drag this down. And we're just going to make a few changes to this. So when button 2, so button 2 is get image, that's this one, right? So we're going to say when button 2 is clicked, get image, we're not calling dog facts anymore, so we're going to click on this and say we're going to call web API 2 dog image. And you can see it's kicked out this block because this code isn't going to work anymore. So the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect that get property. And I'm going to drag this back in. There we go. And I'm going to say set label 1. No, I'm changing image 1 now. All right, so straight away set image 1's picture to. Now, if you're wondering where to get these from, let's say you don't have these blocks at all. If you click on image 1, they're here, right? Set image 1's picture to. That's where those blocks come from. And if you click on the label, the blocks change a little bit because they're two different things, right? Anyway, let's put those back. So set image 1's picture to, again, error if there's an error. Otherwise, so for the else part, set image 1 picture to, I'm going to set it to something. So we're going to take this again, get property, and we're going to drag that back in. But this time, that little data attribute isn't facts. That was from a different API altogether. So this is going to have to change. So I'm going to delete that. So get property, and I'm going to go back to the JSON file for the random dog image. And you can see here, we've got file size here and URL here, and it gives a link to the image. So I think URL is the attribute that I need. But if I'm not sure, let's ask ChatGPT. So is the URL tag in this JSON file the bit that will return, or send to the app, return an image of a dog. And I'm just going to paste that in so it knows what I'm talking about. Let's see what it says. Yes, that is correct. Thank you very much, ChatGPT. I love this website. So I'm just going to copy that URL, go to Thunkable again, click on that, put the URL in there. So that's the property, and it should return a random image. Right. Fingers crossed this works. Let's click web preview, get fact. Yep, that still works. That's awesome. So now the moment of truth, get image. Look at that. It loads the image. And if I click on that again, it loads a different image. So that is how you integrate a web API into your Thunkable apps. And when you go to the free APIs that you can find on GitHub or other places online, and you click on one of these links and you struggle to find the URL or the information that you need in order to get this up and running, look for something called an endpoint, look for something called a path, try and copy and paste that information into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will hopefully be able to give you that full URL that you need. You might get lucky and find a website that just straight up gives you it. It's really easy, but in my experience, you need to do a little bit of reading through the documentation in order to get that full URL made up of the endpoint and path. And it can oftentimes be very confusing. So I highly recommend using ChatGPT just as I did to get this up and running. So there we go. Let's just exit out of web preview. You can see here the code. So I'll leave that on the screen for a few seconds, and you can always pause this video and take a closer look at the code. And then if I go back to the design block, you can see this is what the app looked like in terms of components. 2 buttons, a label, and an image component. And that's it. So there really isn't a lot to it. The hardest part is figuring out that URL for the API. So give it a go yourself. Remember, ChatGPT is an awesome tool to help you get this done. I highly recommend you use ChatGPT. It's one of my favorite websites in the world, right? Good luck at getting your API integrated app up and running, and let's see what you are able to come up with. Good luck.